Federico, we're back with the second installment of our Obsidian series, and today's show is brought to you by Concepts, Memberful, and Linode. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, John. Thank you. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. No, I'm doing really well. I'm starting, get into that busy season of not so much busy with work, although that's got its own challenges, but I mean, holiday season. Shopping, getting Christmas trees, decorating the house, having people over, that kind of thing. It's nice. So it's going pretty well. And that's all ramping up. But we need to dive right into Obsidian. And one of the things I wanted to do before we're going to talk about core plugins today, because Obsidian comes with a set of core plugins, which come with the app when you download it. And then you can install third-party plugins, which we'll cover at another time. Today, we're going to cover these core ones that are there, which ones we use, which ones we don't, what they do, that sort of thing, right? But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit more about splitting the panes in Obsidian again, because I noticed a comment from someone in our Club Mac Stories Plus Discord who said they didn't even realize that you could split these things vertically. And I thought that was an interesting comment because, it's probably, to me, it's one of those things that's maybe more obvious on the Mac than it is on iOS. And I think that's because, Obsidian's kind of its own animal on iOS. And there aren't a whole lot of apps where you split the UI into multiple panes that I can think of. I mean, you have obviously split view and other things that are OS level, but splitting panes within the interface itself is kind of unusual. Usually, you'd find something like a tabbed interface if you have multiple documents open.
Right. Yeah. That's one of the things that makes Obsidian. It's a different look from what you may be used to seeing.
Right.
It kind of reminds me of when Safari for iPad used to have its own custom split screen mode, but then again, that UI was still based on tabs. Now, there are plugins that, of course, Obsidian and plugins. There are plugins that let you turn panes into proper tabs. I've never tried those. I don't like to be too fancy with the modifications that you can apply to the Obsidian UI. But yeah, it's helpful to know that these panes, you can split them, you can manage them on all kinds of screens, on all kinds of devices that can run Obsidian, even on the iPhone. And I mean, it gets kind of inconvenient on the iPhone because
very
of the different, very quickly because of the small screen and the different form factor. But you can do it if you want to.
Sure, you can split it vertically 3-4 times, and you have like a couple of characters in each pane. A width.
Yes.
is really what it comes down to. So it's not really useful on a phone to do that, but on an iPad, it absolutely is useful, and you can split them not just vertically but horizontally. And I don't do that a lot. However, once in a while I do, because maybe you have a short to-do list or a short set of notes that you're referring to that doesn't extend all the way down a full screen of information. It's a good time to split it horizontally if you have a couple of those, and you can see more that way. You could have, a vertical split and then a horizontal split. It's all sorts of stuff you can do with this that is kind of neat, and just has a lot of options. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Concepts. Sketch, note, and explore endless ideas with Concepts Infinite Canvas for iPad. Draw in designer Copic colors with liquid pens and brushes, and organize images, text, and sketches into visual mood boards. Used by creative professionals for all sorts of things like visual thinking, note-taking, team communication, storyboarding, product design, and architectural planning, Concepts lets you sketch and share your ideas in the moment when you have them. Everything you draw in Concepts is a flexible, editable vector. You can nudge, edit, reorganize your ideas with natural finger gestures, drag and drop those images and objects onto the canvas for fast ideation and reference, use layers and grid layouts, organize your work, mark up PDFs, and apply real-world scale for professional design projects. You can export and share everything too in standard high-resolution and vector file types for flexible work between teams and apps. Concepts' built-in presentation mode lets you connect with others for live sharing and graphic-based discussions. You can whiteboard remotely too with teams and clients using apps like Zoom, and then instantly share your discussion. The app is free as a basic sketching tool with the ability to unlock 200 plus libraries of brushes, objects, and services via subscription or a one-time payment. To learn more about Concepts, visit their website today at concepts.app. App Stories listeners can enjoy a special 1-month extended free trial when you sign up for an annual subscription by going to concepts.app/MacStories. Again, that URL to learn more is concepts.app, and that special 1-month extended free trial when you sign up for an annual membership is concepts.app/MacStories. Our thanks to Concepts for their support of the show.
All right, so I think we should start talking about plugins.
Yep.
In Obsidian. And I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible. So there are two different kinds of plugins in Obsidian: core plugins and community plugins. Now, community plugins are third-party plugins that you download from the web, that you can install manually, or that you can browse and install directly inside of Obsidian. Core plugins might as well be called built-in plugins. They come by default with Obsidian. And the thing about core plugins, and which is one of the key factors that differentiates Obsidian from other apps, is that even this kind of core functionality is optional.
Right.
So let's try to unpack this one concept at a time. First of all, plugins in Obsidian, you can call them plugins, you can call them extensions. Plugins are created with web technologies. They are additional features or modifications that may or may not install additional commands, that may or may not modify the UI of Obsidian, add additional sections to a sidebar, for example. They can do all kinds of things. And that's possible because they are written using JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. When you consider this, you see how Obsidian is telling this story, right? Of you write an Electron app, which is something that we discussed in part 1 of this mini-series. And because it's an Electron app, it means that you can take advantage of the same web technologies to create plugins that extend the functionality of Obsidian. Now, the trade-off, as we mentioned last time, is that you are sacrificing some of the native behaviors and appearance settings that you may be used to seeing in native iOS and iPadOS apps. The advantage of that is that it's cross-platform, okay, but also it's extensible, right? Because anyone with any kind of JavaScript or HTML knowledge can build a plugin for Obsidian. And the interesting thing here is that the developers of Obsidian itself, like the developers of Obsidian, are maybe treating some key functionalities of Obsidian as a way to test this plugin architecture. By this, I mean that if you open Obsidian settings and you go to the core plugins section, you will see how many of Obsidian's native features are actually plugins made by the developers that you can disable.
So many, in fact, that there's a search box at the top so you can find the ones that you want to deal with.
Yeah. And I like, this is so different from other text editors that I've used in the past, other note-taking apps, but really other apps in general. Like the idea, sure, there are apps that have tons of settings and they let you disable certain options or certain settings that you may not be interested in. But this is something else. Like here, we're talking about outright removing, like not actually seeing anymore in the UI, entire parts of the application.
Yep.
Like I'm not familiar with any other app that lets me do this. You know, unless we consider like pro level tools like maybe Xcode or Final Cut or 3D software, like It's not like this.
True. And in those situations, the plugins are usually third-party plugins, though. They're not, this is the developer of the actual app basing an enormous chunk of the app itself on their own plugins. And it's kind of interesting to me as we go through these to see what's a plugin and what's just a feature of the app. What's the core app and what is a plugin? Because there's a lot in these core plugins that I consider fundamental to the way Obsidian works. Yet, if you want, you can shut them off.
Yeah, and so yeah, we should talk about this. I think what's the expression? The developers are eating their own dog food, and in this case, I think it kind of applies because they are building this thing using the same technologies that are available to third-party developers.
Right.
So the key features of Obsidian are based on the same APIs, the same JavaScript and HTML that third-party plugin developers can use. So, for example, the File Explorer is a plugin, is a core plugin. And so the basic way in Obsidian that you have to browse folders and your notes, that's a plugin that you can disable. So if you don't want to see the files and the folders in your vault, you can disable the File Explorer plugin and you're not going to see those anymore. I have no idea what happens, honestly, if you do. I never tried. Actually, let me try and see. So if I disable the File Explorer, what happens?
That tab should just go away in the sidebar, I would expect. I mean...
Oh, you can only search.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I mean, one of the things, I tried to break down these plugins into kind of categories, and one of them is finding things. And the thing about Obsidian that we talked about a little bit last week is that there are so many ways to get to your documents that you can afford to shut some of them off if you want. So if you don't want to see the structure of folders and files in the sidebar, you can turn off the File Explorer and just use search. Or you can use the Quick Switcher, which is also a plugin, which allows you to do Command O and start typing characters that you remember from the title of the note to find it that way. Or you can use starred notes, which is yet another plugin. I mean, these are all 4 plugins are ways to get back to your notes. Starred is pretty obvious. It's like starring something in an RSS reader or an email app or something. You just toggle a star on or off. And it's kind of a handy way if you have a collection of notes that you go back to on a regular basis, even if it's only temporarily, you can star them and then you can get back to them that way. But it's just one of many ways you can find things.
This is interesting, right? The fact that because you have so many different options to browse your vault and to find notes, you can pick and choose the method you prefer. Personally, like I like to use the File Explorer because I like to keep a relatively clean and organized base folder, like the root folder of my vault. I like to keep just a handful of notes in there, and then I like to organize everything with folders and subfolders. And I think this is a top tip for you. Both on Mac OS and iPad OS, you can right-click documents in the File Explorer sidebar. This is a sidebar on the left side of the screen. You can right-click them to find additional actions for the selected file. One that I use all the time is rename and, of course, move to a different folder. But this contextual menu, so when you right-click on a file in Obsidian, and again, this works on iPhone, this works on iPad, this contextual menu, and on the Mac, of course, too. This contextual menu itself can be customized by plugins. So you may see in this context menu additional options provided by plugins that you have installed.
Yep.
Like, for example, right now, and we're going to get to that when we talk about third-party plugins, but right now, if I click on a file in the File Explorer sidebar, I see Search Wikipedia, and that's an option provided by a third-party plugin.
Interesting. Yeah, the thing that I don't like about the File Explorer is that it doesn't behave like the Finder. And I think if you're coming, especially if you're on the Mac, you will try to do things like select multiple files and drag them into a folder, and that sort of thing just doesn't work. I'm pretty sure you have to move them always one by one using the right-click method. But, there are differences, but there are also a lot of other ways to deal with things, as we said. I guess another exploring option is using tags. And this is actually one of the core plugins that I had turned on for a long time. and realized I really don't need it or don't want it. So I turned it off. I'm not using tagging at all, which I do use tagging in other apps and other things that I do, but I don't really feel compelled to use them in Obsidian. Are you using them?
I do use tags for some organizational purposes. I have some data view visualizations. Again, we're going to talk about data view, which is a third-party plugin in the future, but I have some data view visualizations based on tags, so I use them. I do not use the tag pane because I never want to browse by tag.
Right.
I just want to add tags and then filter based on tags. Quick appreciation segment for the quick switcher.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's amazing. So Command O, you can, of course, customize the hotkey. The quick switcher is Obsidian's universal file navigation tool. It lets you open any note in any folder or subfolder in your vault in seconds.
Yeah.
It's the fastest implementation of a quick switcher I've seen anywhere. You can optionally choose to also show attachments. This is one of the things that we'll have to cover eventually. In Obsidian, you can also store additional file types like images or PDF documents, and you can embed them in your plain text notes. So we'll talk about that in the future. But by default, the quick switcher will not show you those attachments.
Right.
You can, of course, if you want, enable that option. But I use this a lot. What I love about the quick switcher is you can invoke it with Command O, but also, and this is a bigger conversation that we need to have about Obsidian, is every functionality is both represented in the UI, but it also is a command, right?
Right.
And a command can be activated with a hotkey, but it can also be activated with a button, with an icon. Like, that's the thing about Obsidian. Like you mentioned, you have multiple ways to do the same thing, basically. And in this case, for example, the quick switcher, I have put it as an icon on top of the keyboard on my iPhone in the toolbar, so that on the iPhone I don't have an external keyboard to do Command O. So I can just press that search icon to invoke the quick switcher.
Right, because the quick switcher on the Mac is in that left sidebar as well. You can get to it that way as well. But I use Command O most of the time. And what the thing to think about when you think about the quick switcher, it's a lot like something like Alfred or Launchbar. It opens up a little text field. You start typing the name of your note, and it will show you instantaneously results that match that. And you can use the arrow keys to go down and select one and open it. And you can also, if you type in something there and you think you have already have a note with that name, but you don't, you can type the whole thing and just hit enter, and it creates a new note for you. So it's that's really that's a lot more handy than you might think. But I used that this morning, in fact, for something that I was working for. I thought for this show that I had a note already for something, and I didn't. So it just created the note for me, and I went from there. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Memberful, the easiest way to sell memberships to your audience, used by creators across the web. You can now send paid email newsletters directly through Memberful without needing to connect to a third-party email provider. If you want, you can also publish your paid newsletter content to a Memberful-hosted members-only website. Memberful fades into the background and lets your brand shine. There are no additional fees when you sign up for Memberful's Pro or Premium plans. Plus, you'll save money compared to other popular hosted newsletter platforms. Setup is super simple. Just click a few buttons and start earning. Or you can take ownership and control of your membership business and seamlessly integrate with the most popular email newsletter services. Memberful allows you to build sustainable recurring revenue by selling memberships to your audience. You have full control and ownership of your audience, your brand, and your membership. Memberful includes everything you'll need to run a great membership program, like custom branding, gift subscriptions, Apple Pay, free trials, and a ton more. We've used Memberful for years with Club Mac Stories, and we absolutely love it. We're in control of our relationship with our members, and everything we ever wanted to offer for the club has been available and a whole lot more. I don't know another service that could handle everything we do so well. Get started today for free with no credit card required. Just go to memberful.com/appstories so that they know you came from the show. Again, that URL to learn more about what Memberful can do for you and your audience, memberful.com/app stories. Our thanks to Memberful for their support of the show.
The links category of core plugins. So we talked about backlinks last time. Backlinks, of course, is like, this is also a core plugin and it's optional. You can disable it if you don't want to. But I want to mention a couple of things about internal links and backlinks in this context. So backlinks is a sidebar that you can choose to see or not. It's actually a section of the right sidebar.
Right.
You can choose to have it or not. You can also, in the backlinks section of this sidebar, you will also see something called unlinked mentions. Unlinked mentions are basically Obsidian's way to tell you, hey, I think in this note, you are referencing other notes and you may have forgotten to link them. Obsidian scans the current note for words that may be related to other notes in your vault. And it offers you, basically, it gives you a summary of, hey, here are all the places where I think you forgot to enter an internal link.
Right.
I don't use this section a lot because I add internal links very intentionally. So I appreciate how it's collapsed by default. You don't have to see it all the time. But if you're the kind of person who uses internal links a ton, you may find this useful.
Yeah, no, I think that there are a lot of people who go through and review their notes periodically and add these links, and people who are tending to their digital garden and pruning the weeds. We talked about that last time. We won't go back down that rabbit hole. But yes, that is I'm glad it's collapsed too. I really don't use it, but it's good that it's there. I suppose it may be something that I take advantage of in the future.
Yeah, let me tell you very quickly about one of my favorite core plugins, also related to links. Outgoing links.
Yes.
Now, outgoing links is the opposite of backlinks. Outgoing links is just a sidebar that gives you a summary of all the internal links that you have in the current note. It basically scans the note for all the links with double square brackets, and it shows you all the links that go to other notes from the current note. This is a recent addition to Obsidian. It was added a couple of months ago, I think. I'm using this a lot now because of I've talked about the dashboard note that I keep,
right?
Where it's sort of like my central hub for Obsidian. And in that note, I have a ton of outgoing links. One of the things that I do, for example, I have a section of this note called Working On. And every week in that section, I put links to like the current story that I'm working on for the site, or one of the sections that I'm working on for this week's issue of Mac Stories Weekly. With the outgoing links plugin, I can see all those links in a list, and it makes it very easy for me to quickly navigate to one of those documents that are linked from the dashboard. It's especially handy on the iPhone, because I can trigger this section of the sidebar, this outgoing links section. I can trigger that with a shortcut from the home screen, so that when I tap on an icon on my iPhone, it takes me into Obsidian and it loads immediately this list of links. So I can just tap on one and I can immediately navigate to the document.
For your dashboard in particular, right?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I like that. That's a really good tip. I hadn't thought to do that. That's a great one. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I could select the link and tap follow link manually, but I'm saving a couple of taps, basically.
Yeah, definitely. What else, Federico? Should we talk a little bit about the things that are related to notes in particular? Because there's a lot here. I don't know.
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to start with page preview because that's an easy one. I have Obsidian set up to default to editing mode because I spend the vast majority of my time in a monospace font and I want to be able to make changes to my document. But a lot of people, I think, are using Obsidian for reference materials that maybe don't change a lot. And you can default to the preview mode. And the preview mode, you can have a different font and a different look and styling and things for it. And it can be a lot like just walking through a web page or a book or something of your own reference materials. But there's an icon and there are commands to toggle between those two things, but I'd say I spend 95% of my time in editing mode.
Yeah, especially I'm always in editing mode now because of this plugin that I have installed. It's a third-party plugin that lets me see image previews while still in editing mode, but it only works on the Mac. We're gonna talk about that eventually. But yeah, I think I'm also most of the time in editing mode myself. Paid preview, I think it's really nice.
Yes. Templates. Should we talk about templates?
Okay. Yes, we should. Do you use templates a lot? Because
I do because
really?
Yeah, I do because I work on a lot of things at Mac Stories that are the same.
Oh yeah.
Every week, right? So when we post about app stories, when we post about Unwind, when we do, there's a lot of things we do, and I have a lot of it that are really just internal documents to myself that when I'm preparing Mac Stories, I'll have a set of show notes for the Plus version and for the regular version, and I'll have sponsor scripts. And there are aspects of those that are the same week to week. And I always need those documents. So I just start a new document, hit Command-T, which is my shortcut for templates, type a few characters. It's just like doing the quick switcher where that you're opening, and it will deposit in there the bones of one of these template documents. Now, I'm not
bones.
Yeah, it's the rough structure. I'm not using a lot of variables yet. Templates is something that actually I want to do a lot more with, because one of the things that I have trouble with that slows me down during the week is that when we have advertisers, I'll have bits of information all over the place. I'll have emails with information that's been provided to me. I'll have things that are in documents that are in process for a sponsor post the following week or something for app stories. And what I really need to do is come up with a system where I can keep those bits of information stored somewhere and then drop them in various documents, because I need them for posts, I need them for internal documents, I need them for a lot of different reasons, and then deposit them in there as variables easily. Now, I haven't quite decided whether that's going to be an entirely template-driven thing in Obsidian, or whether I'm going to generalize it a little more and use shortcuts in something like DataJar. I've been playing with DataJar as one potential avenue for this, but haven't had time to really build it out thoroughly yet, because I've got maybe, I don't know, especially with sponsor stuff, I have maybe 10, 12 bits of information that I use in multiple places, and it would be great just to have that somewhere where I can easily access it programmatically.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that you use them. Note Composer, another core plugin. I do not use this one. I prefer a similar third-party plugin called Note Refactor.
Yes.
But basically, Note Composer is... Note Refactor was a popular third-party plugin, and then the Obsidian developers, they did their own sort of Sherlocked that plugin, if you will. Mm-hmm. Note Composer, it lets you merge, split, and refactor notes, whereby refactor, it usually means you select a portion of a document and you turn it into its own separate document. So it's a bunch of merge, split, and refactor commands that you can take advantage if you enable this core plugin. If you don't want to use it, like I don't want to use it, I keep it disabled. Word count. You may think, wait, the word count is a core plugin? Yeah,
yeah, the
word count is a plugin. If you want to see a word count, great. It's in the right sidebar. If you don't want to see it because, hey, you don't want to be bothered by numbers, you can keep it disabled. Obviously, I keep it enabled because it's useful to know how much I write.
Mm-hmm.
Opening default app. This is an interesting one. So opening default app, it lets you... We mentioned last time how notes in Obsidian are markdown files in your file system, right?
Right.
Opening default app, it lets you open the file for the current note in the default app for the computer that you're currently using. Now, I think you know where this is going. This plugin behaves differently on Mac and iOS and iPadOS.
Yep.
On the Mac, it lets you open the file with the default app that is associated with the usually markdown file type. I just wrote about this in Mac Stories Weekly a couple of weeks ago. So in my case, for example, I use a third-party app on my Mac called Typewriter. It's a very lightweight markdown editor. And when I hit the command for the opening default app plugin, it lets me open the note that I'm looking at in Obsidian in an external text editor, right?
Yep.
On iOS and iPadOS, there's no concept of default apps based on file type associations. So what happens is it just loads the share sheet. If you trigger this command on iPhone and iPad, it takes the current note and it sends a copy of the note to the share sheet. This is how I manually backup my articles, my drafts to working copy or Dropbox, or I can send you documents on iMessage when I'm on the iPhone or iPad. I hit Command D, which is my shortcut, my hotkey for opening default app, and it loads the share sheet, and then I just pick an extension.
No, that's handy. That's handy. It's too bad that it's a copy, I suppose, and that you're not any changes that get made are in a copy. But that's iOS for you, I suppose. I use that too. I mean, I don't use it a lot. I do occasionally like editing, especially on my Mac, in an app that isn't Obsidian. So Typewriter is a good example. That's a really nice one that's super lightweight, as you said, or IA Writer, or whatever it happens to be, as long as it has access to the file system and can point at the folder where you've got your Obsidian vaults, you're good to go and you can use it there. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Linode. Simplify your cloud infrastructure today by signing up for Linode. With Linode, you can develop, deploy, and scale your modern applications faster and easier than ever. Whether you're developing a personal project or managing larger workloads, you deserve the simple, affordable, and accessible cloud computing solutions that Linode offers. With Linode, it's easy to build applications using its simple Cloud Manager, API, or command line interface. And of course, you can scale up or down as needed with standard virtual machines, dedicated CPUs, and enterprise-grade GPUs. Linode's what powers Club Mac Stories, and we absolutely love it. We can scale the site and related web apps up and down as needed and never have to pay for more computing power than we need. It's been the reliable and affordable solution that we needed to expand the club. Visit linode.com/appstories today to learn more and get started with $100 of free credit. That's an amazing deal. There are no hidden fees, and you can scale up and down without any penalty. Linode offers the industry's best price-to-performance value for compute instances, including shared, dedicated, high memory, and GPUs. You get free DDoS protection, cloud firewall, unfiltered API access, and a whole lot more too. Linode offers predictable flat fee pricing, which is universal across all of its 11 data centers. And it has terrific support with no tiers and no handoffs. You can talk to a real person on the telephone 24/7, 365 days a year. So support is always there when you need it from Linode's highly trained, award-winning support team who are dedicated to finding the answers you need. So once again, head on over to linode.com/appstories today to learn more and get started with that $100 of free credit. Our thanks to Linode for their support of the show. Federico, let's talk about workspaces. Workspaces is really powerful. It's a way to bookmark a state in Obsidian. So
yes, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Right. So let's imagine that, you're Federico and you're working and you've got your dashboard on the right, and on the left, you've got something you're writing for Mac Stories Weekly. And Federico gets to the end of the day and he's like, I'm done. I'm not working anymore today. He can save that as a workspace. So the next day when he opens it up, he can use that plugin and go back to that exact workspace and pick up exactly where he left off. I use this a lot while I was working on the Monterey review because it's such a long-term project. So I would have maybe a pane of research notes, a pane of text I was writing, and another pane that might have been, like tasks and things that I have to follow up on with the review. And I would just save that continually day to day and reopen it and pick up where I left off because it was one of those projects that took a lot of time. So I'm sure you used it for the iOS review too, right?
Yes, I used this a ton for different I use it for combinations of notes, right?
Right. That's
in the iOS review.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
in the
important because
iOS
you can actually save multiple workspaces, which is so you have it's kind of like what you've always wanted on the iPad with setting up saved split views, but it's inside Obsidian.
Yes, which is why you keep referring to Obsidian as a writing OS because it lets me do all of these things, right? During the iOS review season, I had different pairs of notes or states of the app that I could easily navigate between. Right now, now that the iOS review is done, I only have 2 workspaces. One is called Dashboard, of course, and it's the dashboard note on the left in editing mode and the dashboard note in preview mode on the right side of the screen. This is the thing to understand about workspaces. It's incredible because it lets you save any state of Obsidian as a workspace.
Yep.
You can, by state, I mean not just the files that you have open, but also how many panes, where they are, which sidebar is shown. Like exactly what you're looking at can be saved as a workspace.
Are they in preview mode? Are they in editing mode? And the nice thing about like a dashboard, especially having both in, you might wonder why would you have something in preview and in editing mode? One reason is just for sometimes proofreading in a different mode is helpful. But for something like a dashboard, if you've put in there tasks for yourself using the syntax for checkboxes, you can actually check things off in the preview mode, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. And the other workspace that I have is called Shortcut Ideas. It's a set of 3 notes, just as split as vertical panes, where I have my general shortcut ideas note on the left. This is a note where I drop in all kinds of ideas for shortcuts. And at the moment, let's see, which are the 2 notes. I have, Music Bot 2.0, which is a big shortcut that I'm working on for 2022, and Reminder Bot. It's another shortcut for next year, joining the bot family of shortcuts. We'll talk about this again in the future. But yeah, this workspace is like all my ideas for shortcuts at the moment. I can open this workspace and I know that, okay, I'm in shortcuts research and thinking mode.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anything else. And I can easily drop in and, move ideas back and forth. And then when I'm done, I can hit my shortcut for the workspace picker and I can switch back to something else.
Well, right now, I've got just one workspace because I am experimenting with your dashboard method. I think I explained last week that I have a note that's really like my week note where I'm planning my week and I have a lot of things in there about what I want to get accomplished and notes for the week and that sort of thing. And what I've done is I've taken a dashboard note that expands a little bit in some categories that are beyond the week planning note and made the week planning note a link in that dashboard. So this workspace has the dashboard on the left and the week planning mode on the right. And it's a workspace that I tend to use at some point during the weekend when I'm starting to think about the next week and what needs to get done. I will open that up and, check it out and start filling out the notes for the week and making sure that everything's properly linked back to the dashboard.
Yeah. We should mention before we wrap up two different ways to trigger commands.
Yes. And I want to
get
get your thoughts on this because we've talked a lot about hotkeys, right? And how basically any functionality in this app can be triggered by a hotkey. And the command palette is, which I've got tied to Command P.
Same.
Because I think that's the default that's out of the box. But the command palette works a lot like the quick switcher where you hit that key combination and it opens up a text field, and you start typing words and it filters for whatever commands match those words. And that's how, if I don't have a keyboard shortcut enabled or I don't remember the keyboard shortcut, that's how I trigger various commands. Slash commands, I want to hear from you, Federico, if you're using them and how you think they might work differently than using the command palette, because I don't know that they're fairly new. Slash commands are a fairly new feature, and I'm not using them a lot. I'm still kind of tied to using Command P.
Yeah, I don't use the slash command UI a ton. I really don't. I think it's going to be more useful on iPhone, where again,
Hmm,
you don't have access to an external keyboard to do Command P. So I can imagine how typing a forward slash and then you see the list of
that's
commands
true.
that may be a little more convenient than doing so, than on a Mac or iPad. But also on the iPhone, again, in the spirit of you have multiple ways to open things, the command palette is itself, something that you can trigger, sure with a hotkey, sure with a slash, but also you can have an icon, as I mentioned, or on the mobile app. So on iPhone and iPad, you can have the mobile quick action, which is basically a gesture. It's a pull down gesture that is customizable. So you can pull down anywhere in Obsidian. You see this sort of like pull to refresh UI that is not a refresh indicator, it's a purple highlight. And that gesture can be paired with any command in Obsidian.
Yes.
And the way that I have set it up is the quick action shows me the command palette, right? So that I can just pull down and I see my list of commands, and it's super easy to do so on an iPhone. And about the command palette, the last thing that I want to say is it really helps in my experience with discoverability of commands, because being able to type a command, it's sort of like typing in the help search
Right.
bar in the menu bar of Mac apps. Like you can find commands by typing their name, and that's excellent for discoverability. But it also shows you the hotkeys for commands, which helps your sort of your muscle memory over time. You're learning as you use Obsidian. You're memorizing these hotkeys. And what I really like about it, you can pin some of your most used commands to the top of the command palette, so that when you invoke the command palette, some of your favorite commands, they are always pinned to the very top of the list.
Right. And then you can use the arrow keys to go down and get, reach them without actually typing the words, which is
Yep.
fantastic. All right, Federico. Well, that's a lot of functionality built into plugins, which is kind of remarkable. And it's something that takes a little bit getting used to, but I like it. I mean, I like the fact that because I don't use the tag pane, I can shut that off. And there's other things that I've turned off as well. So, it's kind of powerful that way. We are going to dig into some more Obsidian stuff soon enough. But for right now, that's it for this week. You can get an extended version of this show that is ad-free and in high bitrate audio and delivered to you early by subscribing to App Stories Plus. That's our subscription version of the show. And you can find out more about what that involves and what it is and sign up at appstories.plus. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for this episode, Concepts, Memberful, and Linode. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net and over at Club Mac Stories. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.